Now, even though I try not to use the word filler in my reviews very often, I try to, I guess you could say, dig a little deeper and look for the hidden nugget of importance or relevancy that perhaps elevates an episode beyond that dreaded tag, like with last week's episode, which, yeah, could maybe be called filler or classified as that, but does offer us some good character growth for Tech and sets up conflict with Sid down the road, not to mention it was pretty fun overall. Anyway, even though there was a bright silver lining in last week's episode, it's a little harder to find one in this week's, which isn't to say it was horrible or pointless, and as I've said before, just because something is filler doesn't mean it's bad. A one-off episode could still be fun, good, and enjoyable in and of itself, not to mention there was potentially something interesting to talk about, which I'll get to in a minute. But yeah, I do have to say that it did feel a lot like filler this week, and the only purpose this episode seemed to serve for the larger narrative of the series, not that every single episode has to push it forward in profound or monumental ways, but all it felt like it did was remind us that Fee is a character in the show, a recurring one, apparently, which is, well, I'll let you decide if you're a fan of that or not, but to me she comes off feeling a bit like a budget Dr. Aphra from the comics. And so overall, this episode kind of feels like the result of the creators or writers being told by Disney that they want 16 episodes this season, and they could only come up with an idea for 15. But it turns out one of the writers was reading The Hobbit at the time and figured they could just fill in the gap by making an episode about the Bad Batch going on a quest for the Arkenstone. But since they couldn't call it that for, I'd imagine, copyright reasons, not to mention that is way too on the nose, they decided to go and call it its other name, The Heart of the Mountain. Because, yeah, the power core they found, which was the treasure they were looking for initially, it actually powered or was some kind of key for some massive contraption of destruction. It did somewhat resemble the Arkenstone from The Hobbit. I can't believe it was a completely random coincidence. And speaking of coincidences, I'm going to look past the fact that Omega picked up like 6 things from this junkyard full of stuff, and one of them just so happened to be a map or compass, I should say, to a treasure vault or whatever it was thought to be. It obviously turned out to be much more than just some kind of treasure vault. It turned out to be, again, that contraption of destruction, as I called it. Anyway, it also just so happened that Fee knew about this place or was able to recognize this as a compass that led to this place called Scaranal and all of that. And personally here, I think it would have just made more sense for Fee to show up and say she just so happened to come by this compass that she promises leads to a legendary treasure, but that she might need a bit of extra muscle and smarts to recover it, and so she'll give them half if they help, which is also a pretty generic way to go about it, but I think it's a little less contrived than what we got. But for some reason it seems they wanted Omega to be the sort of catalyst for the episode, and had her find this compass. Either way, after Hunter shows some reluctance to follow this treasure map, and after Echo points out what happened the last time they went treasure hunting, which is a reference to the first 2 episodes of the season, Omega basically smiles and says, "Pretty please," and they all just agree to go, apparently just believing and trusting Fee, who is insisting this has to be a treasure map and that it couldn't possibly have been found in a junkyard for any reason whatsoever, like it was worthless. What follows then is essentially a Tomb Raider puzzle-solving episode that does, for the most part actually, kind of get me interested in what exactly could be at the end of the rainbow here, as we learn this place predates the Republic and the Jedi Order. There is hope for a sort of cool reveal or a potential connection here. And we do maybe get it. I don't know. As soon as I saw the gigantic, multi-legged, mechanical creature come to life and saw the triangular-ish shape of the head, my first thought was Zepho from Fallen Order. Then you factor in the big blue killer laser beam, that it was hidden in some kind of tomb and protected by all these traps and puzzles, and it all, again, kind of points to the Zepho without, unfortunately, anyone like Fee coming right out and saying this could be some sort of ancient thing created by them. Which is the real frustrating part of the episode for me. We learn absolutely nothing about any and all of this, and are only left to speculate as to why the thing may have been created in the first place, and why it apparently raised the planet. We learn early on, when they first arrived, that the planet is uninhabitable after something happened, and that something seems to be, I'm going to call it, the giant Zepho beast, not to confuse it with the Xylo beast. I think that thing raised the planet, obviously, and killed everybody or destroyed everything with its big I-beam attack. Which then leaves the question of, did it get dropped there by someone who didn't like the people of this planet and it destroyed them all and destroyed everything on the planet? Or maybe did the former inhabitants of this planet, which I'm assuming there were some, did they create it and it turned on them? Or was it designed to destroy them? Was there some sort of war that this thing got used in? Just what happened to the planet? I mean, one way or the other, it did seem to purposely go after Fee's droid and after the ship until they stopped it in the nick of time by putting the heart of the mountain back in, which caused the heart, to melt for reasons. I don't know why it activated upon removing the heart, unless the Zepho beast was meant to protect the heart, even though it didn't seem to have any type of internal security, other than, of course, all the traps and stuff. Meaning if someone is already inside and they made it past those traps, they should in theory be able to take the heart, disable the thing, and make their escape with the heart. It actually feels more like the traps are in place to stop anyone from actually activating this thing, and that is why it's hidden on this desolate planet. Perhaps it didn't destroy the planet at all, it was just dropped off there on this planet where no one would ever find it again, hopefully. And yes, I know I'm probably way overthinking this, and I'm not expecting to get every single answer, don't get me wrong. But it's just one of those things that at face value seems to make little or no sense. Like it's just in there to be intriguing and mysterious without them really giving it much thought. And it isn't likely to get explained anytime soon or maybe ever. I don't think, though I certainly could be wrong, that we're going back to this planet in any episode anytime soon. Unless they, I don't know, maybe return to the planet at some point to use the Zepho beast as a weapon against somebody, which means they'd have to figure out how to reactivate it without the heart of the mountain, which I guess is something that could happen and they could figure out. Tech seems to be able to figure out quite a bit. Or maybe they'll eventually set up some type of base on this planet, considering the system wasn't on any of the known star charts, which adds to the mystery we're likely to never have answered. Other than that, other than this possibly coming back into play somehow, some way down the line, or it being related to the Zepho in some capacity, which sure would be pretty cool, especially if you're a fan of Fallen Order and the upcoming game Survivor, there's just not a whole lot to talk about with this episode. No character in particular really shined, save maybe Fee. Again, this felt like an episode to remind us she's a thing, and to let us know she's a pirate who knows stuff about treasures and that sort of thing. However, all our team members, the Bad Batch itself, sort of fall back into their tropes of strong guy, smart guy, leader guy, and so on all over again, and Omega ends up talking them into something that almost gets them killed, and it's just like, whatever, we didn't end up dying, so no big deal. I'm sure they'll do it all again next time after she has some kind of crazy suggestion again. And yeah, I do get that this is a show aimed at, well, I'd argue both children and adults, and as sort of the insert character for the younger crowd, of course, Omega will almost always be sort of featured and presented as someone who kids like and want to mimic, you could say. I do understand this show is not intended to, say, be on the same level as something like Andor. I'm not looking at it or attempting to judge it by those same criteria, even. Nevertheless, as I was just saying, they do have to know a large portion of their viewership, probably the majority if we're being honest, is adults. And though I do overall enjoy this series, I think it has some really fantastic episodes, and I think it has some really dud episodes. I still think the weakest part of the show is the Bad Batch themselves, and this episode doesn't change my mind about that. The actual team, the titular characters, tend to come off as flat in these more generic episodes especially, and I keep hoping they find a way to truly make me care about this team. Like last week, doing something good for Tech. That was a great episode, really highlighted him, and I was rooting for him in the race. I knew he was going to win. Anyway, episodes like this, though not horrible, they're also not great. And again, they're not really helping the team. And I'm hoping, as I keep saying at the end of all of these reviews, that by the end of the season, I actually really do care about the Bad Batch themselves. You know, the guys the show is named after. Well, that's all I got for you this time. Now it's your turn to take to the comments below and tell me what you thought about this episode. Was it an enjoyable one-off episode, or maybe one that will come back to play a factor later on? Or was it just an episode for the sake of getting an episode? Whatever the case may be, leave your comments below and let's talk some Star Wars. And until next time, thanks for watching.